In the chaotic 1960s, as America split between radicals of the left and right, moderation made an unexpected comeback. Two strikingly different men would each try to lead it, one through quiet reason, the other through something far stranger. Tonight on The History of Moderatism, Episode 2, The Reasonable Generation. With the assassination of Miroslav Kurycki in August 1936, the moderate party of Pilovia suffered a blow from which it never recovered. The tiny republic was conquered and reconquered, changing flags 47 times during the war. The moderates faded into obscurity. Yet moderation, it turned out, was harder to kill than its founder. By the 1960s, the Western world was deeply divided between radical left and radical right. In the midst of this upheaval, a quiet counter-movement was stirring, one that wanted no part of either side. To truly understand the moderate resurgence of the 1960s, what would become known as the reasonable generation and the C averages, we must look at two strikingly different yet equally bland individuals: Harold Ziemniak, the mild-mannered assistant librarian who built a political movement on American campuses, and brother Howard Meh, the peculiar cult leader who attracted devoted followers not through charisma, but through the sheer power of being completely unremarkable. It began, as so many things did in the 1960s, on a Midwest American campus, Grod's University, where conservative administrators had banned live comedy performances, calling them subversive and disruptive. In response, radical students launched a noisy sit-in at the Student Union, proudly calling it the Turn-On, Tune-In, Drop-Out, Stand-Up, Sit-In. As the occupation stretched into its third week and the university teetered on the edge of financial ruin, one quiet figure wandered into the chaos. Harold Ziemniak, a painfully ordinary assistant librarian, had simply come to return an overdue book. It was an overdue fine that would spark a revolution. Instead of joining the shouting, Ziemniak stood up and calmly suggested that perhaps both administrators and protesters were being slightly unreasonable. To everyone's surprise, some exhausted students actually listened. Within weeks, he found himself leading informal, reasonable discussions in the library basement. At the same time, a popular social organization on campus, the Spare Key Club, began referring to themselves as the C averages and argued passionately for the right to reprioritize their energy while not abandoning academic pursuits. This modest group soon merged with Ziemniak's growing circle. Almost by accident, the painfully ordinary assistant librarian became the public face of an entire movement. They adopted a simple but unmistakable symbol, a happy face with a perfectly straight mouth, known simply as the face. Within months, these straight-mouthed buttons were everywhere on American campuses and even began to appear in popular media. At the very height of his fame, Harold Ziemniak seemed untouchable. He drew medium to upper medium-sized crowds, delivered a well-received speech at the 1966 National Moderate Convention, and his popularity was spreading. All across America, people appeared to be moving toward the middle. But it was not to last. Questions slowly began to emerge about Ziemniak's dedication. Walter Evenkiel, a moderate leader from New England, was emerging as a serious rival. Then, in July 1974, Persons magazine published a series of candid photographs. They showed Ziemniak at a rest stop near Woodstock, wearing sandals with no socks, a tie-dye shirt, and his hair a full half-inch longer than usual. To the now radicalized moderates, this was unforgivable extremism. Within weeks, Ziemniak was denounced as a radical. The reasonable generation collapsed almost overnight. While Harold Ziemniak's movement was growing on university campuses, a very different kind of moderation was quietly taking shape in the suburbs. Norman Meh had always been perfectly unremarkable. He grew up in a normal house with normal parents and lived a thoroughly average life. After a brief and unexciting career as an insurance adjuster, He began holding small discussion groups with a few friends in his parents' basement. Those modest meetings slowly grew. More people arrived. They gave their little group a name, the Temple of the Triune Bears, a reference to the children's story of Goldilocks, in which 3 bears represented the perfect middle path, one too big, one too small, and one just right. But gradually the tone of the gatherings deepened. The teachings became more earnest. They developed elaborate daily rituals, exactly 23 minutes of meditation each morning, meals that were deliberately neither hot nor cold, and long readings from the sacred text of Goldilocks. Eventually, the basement proved too small. The group pooled their modest resources and relocated to a quiet ranch on the outskirts of town, where they could pursue their faith without distraction. There, under Norman's calm, monotone guidance, they began to speak of an approaching event they called the Final Moderation, a great reckoning in which extremists of every kind would finally destroy each other. Norman became convinced that this apocalypse could be gently encouraged through small, balanced acts of interference in the world. It was here that they started what they called midnight balancing, quiet nighttime raids in which followers would slip into sleeping neighborhoods and let just enough air out of car tires to cause mild inconvenience the next morning. They believed these tiny disruptions would slowly build tension between the radicals until the final moderation arrived. Norman himself became fixated on a bland folk rock album by an obscure band, spending hours interpreting its forgettable lyrics as prophecies of the coming final moderation. Everything changed on the night of October 17, 1971. 84-year-old Salvatore Sal Giuseppe Moretti Fontana stepped out onto his front porch for his usual evening cigar. As he lowered himself into his favorite wicker chair, the slightly softened tire on his old Buick gave way just enough. The next morning, the local newspaper ran the headline, "Local Man Injured by Tire Flattening Cult." The public outcry was immediate. Within days, the entire temple was raided and arrested. In the glare of a highly publicized trial, the prosecutor branded Norman May a dangerous cult leader who had brainwashed his followers into a campaign of petty domestic terrorism. Through it all, Norman May sat quietly in the dock with the same mild, slightly puzzled expression he had worn his entire life. By the mid-1970s, both the Reasonable Generation and the Temple of the Triune Bears had collapsed in scandal, and once again, moderatism appeared to have burned itself out. But moderation, as we have learned, is remarkably difficult to kill. Next time, on the history of moderatism, we travel to the late 1980s, where a new generation of believers emerges, the neo-mods, led by a young man who believed God himself wanted us all to be moderate.